Good morning and welcome to the June 18th Sandag Transportation Committee meeting. I really wanted to start off by acknowledging that today is a historic day where our federal government actually commemorated the day when enslaved African Americans in Texas were the last to be informed of their liberation from slavery 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued. In the eve of Juneteenth, I wanted to carve out a space in this committee to recognize and reflect on all the work we have left to do in our continued commitment to build a more equitable society. And so I wanted us to make sure that we remembered. And so thank you, everyone, for letting me share with you. Before we get started, I wanted to share that we will be hosting simultaneously translation of this meeting into Spanish, and I wanted to introduce our translator with Spanish language instructions. Carlos, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good morning, Supervisor Vargas, and thank you. This announcement will be for our Spanish speakers. Buenos días. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, por favor desplácese a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen sus controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, parece un globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish o español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, en celular, tableta, etc., presione primero los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Por último, si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio o silenciar audio original. Gracias, and thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you. Now please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, I'm going to ask our clerk, Ms. Francisca Webb, to confirm that we have a quorum.
Thank you, Chair. We do have a quorum.
All right. Ms. Webb, can you put your volume up a little bit? Because I kind of am not hearing you very well.
Is that better?
Yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Now I'm going to, I'd like to remind the members and public on our process for both member and public comments. The primary members will be using their cameras and we will take live public comments. Members are asked to turn on their cameras when they have a comment or question, and then I will then recognize them. I'm going to now ask our legal counsel, Ms. Amberlyn, to provide a quick reminder on how the public comments will work. Please, Ms. Amberlyn.
Hi, Supervisor. This is John Kirk, General Counsel. I'm going to be sitting in for Amberlyn here for a while.
Oh, welcome.
Apologize to you for that. As noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailed comments, the public may also provide live comments during today's meeting. In order to provide live comments, you can join today's Zoom meeting through the link or by dialing one of the numbers from your phone that are provided on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. When public comments are called for on an item, if you're using the Zoom platform, click on the raise hand icon in the Zoom toolbar. That's at the top right of the screen, and the chair will call on you by the name you provided. If you're participating by telephone, press *9 on your telephone, and that will activate the raise hand function to indicate your desire to speak. The chair will call on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number if you are participating by telephone. The organizers will ask you to unmute when you're called on, and the instructions for providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of Sandag's website at www.sandag.org. All comments, whether emailed or live, will be made a part of today's meeting record. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And item number 1, public comments, communications, member comments. Public comments under this agenda item will be limited to 5 public speakers. Members of the public shall have the opportunity to address the Transportation Committee on any issue within the jurisdiction of Sandag that is not on this agenda. Public speakers are limited to 3 minutes or less per person. Committee members also may provide information and announcement under this agenda item. If the number of public comments under this agenda item exceeds 5, additional public comments will be taken at the end of the agenda. Subjects of previous agenda items may not again be addressed under public comment. I'm going to ask any members of the public who wish to offer a public comment not related to a matter on today's agenda to please raise your hand at this time so we can call on you. Let's see if we have any.
Chair, I see no hands from the public.
Thank you very much. Now, are there any committee member comments? I think I see one. Mr. Gallarda.
Good morning, Chair Vargas and members of the Transportation Committee. I wanted to mention a couple of quick things. One is first, Chair Vargas, thank you for joining Caltrans and Sandag yesterday in the event for the ribbon cutting of the 805 Sweetwater River Bridge, which also is part of a major investment that Caltrans and Sandag have made in transportation in the South Bay. I wanted to let everybody know that tomorrow will be the second weekend that we will be closing Interstate 8 between 67 and 125 to reconstruct the riding surface of the bridge on 8/67. So starting tonight at 9 o'clock, I-8 will be closed in the westbound direction. Traffic will be detoured through 67, 52, and back to 8 through 125. This is part of a major project to correct deficiencies that we've had in this aging bridge that was literally falling apart. So I want to thank the public for their patience as we complete this work this weekend. And next week on the 24th, we will be hosting a statewide Clean California events. These are events to highlight the importance and the value of the governor's Clean California proposal. So there will be some events happening here in San Diego as well. We're still putting the finishing details on that. So more information will be distributed early next week. Thank you, everyone.
Very much, and it was my pleasure to join both Chair Blakespear from Sandag and Mayor Sotelo Solis and Mayor Mary Salas. It was a fantastic morning. I also wanted to share that on our June 8th San Diego County Board of Supervisors meeting, we approved our American Rescue Plan framework for the county. And I'm really happy to share that we allocated $3 million for no-cost transportation for seniors and for youth 24 and under. For this funding, the county looks forward to working closely with Sandag to help us administer a Transit Pass program for youth and seniors in our communities through the transit agencies in San Diego region. And I cannot tell you how thrilled I am about that. So I'm excited. And now let me introduce our fearless executive director, Mr. Hassan.
I think there's Mr. Sankey wants to say something, Supervisor.
I missed you, Mr. Sankey. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Not to worry, Madam Supervisor, and thank you to the county for partnering with the agencies on moving that particularly important aspect of transporting younger folks in our community forward. So Hassan and Colleen and Jennifer, I want to salute you for attending our MTS board meeting yesterday and focus on a couple of South County items as the South County rep on this committee that were brought up and further the discussion as it moves forward. We talked a lot about grade separation. Mary Salas was quite eloquent about that. The Blue Line Express and the Purple Line are things that are really going to be critical to the success of moving folks in the South Bay. And I'm going to continue to remind everybody that alternate transportation options to our South Bay military installations, including Amphib Base, North Island, and 32nd Street, will be greatly facilitated by the addition of real ferry service, as happens in so many other cities along our coast. So thank you. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, sir. Now I'm going to turn it over to Hassan.
Thank you, Chair Vargas, Supervisor Vargas. Thank you very much for your leadership and especially for getting the county to contribute $3 million because as you and I spoke, Sandag is going to add significant amount to that, and we're going to work with our transit agencies, MTS and NCTD, to start piloting, frequent services, 24-hour services, youth pass, and seniors. So I appreciate your leadership on this. This is important. A couple of items to update the committee on. One is, again, thank you, Supervisor, for being at the celebration with our chair, second vice chair, Chair Blakespear, second vice chair Stella Salit, Mayor Salas. This is a significant bridge celebration, and thank you, Gustavo and Caltrans, for your partnership with Sandag. I also want to thank Supervisor Vargas and Vice Chair Raul Campillo for joining us, joining Gustavo and myself for an Otay Mesa 2 tour. I hope the supervisor one of those days will invite the whole committee to go and see the amazing work that's taking place on the border. Recently, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee released their latest draft Service Transportation Authorization Bill. They call it the Invest in America Act. I'm happy to share with you that 4 of our SANDAG requests were included in the Investment Act. And let me be more specific. $12.5 million for Los Angeles coastal realignment, $12.5 million for Otay Mesa East Port of Entry, and $25 million for Central Mobility Hub. The Central Mobility Hub was the largest in the nation in terms of earmark. I want to thank, on top of that, Caltrans and SANDAG worked together with Representative Darrell Issa to ensure $20 million for the Interstate 15 State Route 78 Managed Lane project. I want to thank all of our congressional leaders who, by the way, all of them were here last week, joined Gustavo and myself for the Otay Mesa tour. This is really significant when you have all of your congressional members from both parties. How many times you can say that these days? From both parties, join the agencies in making sure we move Otay Mesa to. That regard, last week, and again this week, I met with Gustavo, I met with Lieutenant Governor, our Lieutenant Governor, and I can tell you that she is very committed to Otay Mesa too, and she's going to do everything possible from the state perspective to make sure that this project moves forward. It is important to say that we have a September 2024 for the opening of this facility. And to do that, we have to move really fast. And to do that, we have to ensure that our partners in the other side of the border are moving as fast. We were told they are, we will see, but this is an amazing project. This is an amazing priorities for SANDAG. As you also know, we released on May 28th the regional draft transportation plan. Mr. Sankey talked about our presentation to the MTS yesterday. We're doing many presentations to stakeholders and agencies. The close of public comment will be August 5th. So we have between now and August 5th to get your comments in. Let me just say a little bit about what I told the BIA this morning with Colleen and Ray Major. This truly is a plan that reimagines the future of transportation. And Mr. Sankey, yes, we are going to look at ferry services. Absolutely. This is all about future mobility, creativity, innovation, technology, but also about flexibility and providing choices. And yes, it's expensive, but I believe very strongly that it's worth the cost that we're investing in. Now, let me just say, some of you probably hear this. You'll hear, oh my God, SANDAG is gonna spy on us, monitor our movement, charge us money to drive, they're against drivers. This is fear-mongering BS, just to be very frank. This plan is not about spying on anybody. It's about charging or being against driving. This plan provides real choices for San Diegans. This plan allows San Diegans to dream, and hopefully you as civic leaders will help them accomplish those dreams. So this regional plan is really a plan that tells a lot about SANDAG and the team you have here. You have a great team working on this plan. And that team truly is have one goal and one goal only, to provide the greatest transportation system in the world for San Diego, for the 3.4 million of them, all of them, regardless of which part of the region they live in. So please, you're the leaders. So when you speak about the plan, and if you need help on that, let me know. But this plan is about linking transportation and land use. This plan is about social equity and social justice. It's about getting rid of the sins of the past. This plan is about making transit competitive. And this plan is not about being against people who drive. If you drive, continue to drive. I want you to drive safer and faster. But we also want to make it possible for you to take transit. We want to make it possible for you to walk if you choose to, or bike, or take the next Uber and Lyft smart shuttle. This plan anticipates technology. This plan is going to reduce greenhouse gas emission, reduce vehicle mount travel. This plan is going to meet federal and state mandates. So the talking points and the narrative of the plan should be Sandag is accountable, is credible, and Sandag in the past made promises through Transnet. And the next meeting, I'm going to show you during my executive director report, a 3D map, what we delivered through Transnet so far. I can tell you, and way before my time, this agency delivered more than any other agency with the amount of money it has in the state, in the country. We delivered real projects. We delivered the I-15 hot lanes. We're delivering the mid-coast that very shortly we're going to turn to MTS to operate. We delivered the largest infrastructure project in San Diego's history. We delivered a lot of bikeways and projects. So promises made, promises kept as far as I'm concerned. And so the talking point about, oh my God, they promised me this, they didn't do it. It's not the case. And very soon we're going to have this discussion. Just so you know, another milestone is our team is ready to celebrate the unveiling of the VA Medical Center trolley station. This is very significant because it's honor our veterans, but also it's an amazing piece of art if you get a chance to visit. So Supervisor, Chair Vargas, that concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Hassan. Mr. Benelli has his hand up. Mr. Benelli?
Thank you, Supervisor. Just wanted to say a thank you to Sandag and Hassan. On Tuesday at the Board of Port Commissioners, Sandag staff came over and presented an in-depth look at the Lausanne corridor, which is so important to freight movement in our region and to the future of our port. So thank you, Sandag. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I did want to say thank you. And we will be, actually the tour that we did in East Otay Mesa seems like it was a long time ago. So I should say that, but I would like to invite all the other members, and let's try to set up a time where it's convenient for everyone. I think you will be amazed at what's happening. And I think that together we can make that happen. And then I also did want to say thank you. I did mention to the folks when we were cutting the ribbon yesterday that I feel like we're doing a lot. And so that's a really, really good thing. And I'm excited to see that things are moving quickly. So thank you for that. Are there any public comments for Mr. Hassan's presentation, Madam Clerk?
No, Chair, no hands from the public.
Thank you. Are there any other member comments? All right, seeing none. Oh, there's one attendee. I just saw him.
Thank you. Jeff Dosick, you can go ahead and provide your comments when you're ready. Jeff, you're self-muted at the moment.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We can, thank you.
All right, thank you. So let me come back to my statement here. I live in University City, and I'd like to acknowledge that with the building of the Sorrento Valley bike path from the coaster station to UCSD, I and many other e-bike riders are able to make the commute and not sit on the freeway in a car. The explosion of the e-bike users throughout San Diego for commuting is amazing. However, in the UC area, in the last few years, which had great connected bike lanes, we have seen them chopped up and made into turn lanes for cars at busy intersections. In the morning and afternoon rush hour, Those quiet bike lanes all the rest of the time are no longer safe at the corners where the cars want to turn right. And the bike riders who used to have a bike lane sitting at the red light were now sitting ducks. One example, and there are many, is Eastgate Mall, which just before Genesee Avenue going west, which is right at the trolley stop, this bike lane at the corner 30 to 40 yards back has been removed and is now a right turn lane. Folks who will be using the trolley and need to get that last mile to and from work with their bikes will not make this trip. It is currently so unsafe. These bike lanes need to be restored and connected. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other member comments, Madam Clerk, I'm going to go ahead and ask, we're going to move to approve the consent agenda, but before I ask if any member would like to pull, the clerk has a
Supervisor, you just muted yourself.
I don't know how I did that. But anyway, the only change that we have is that the clerk has advised that we will have a change in that Supervisor Anderson was in attendance and he was noted as he wasn't. So with that change, if a member would like to pull the item on the consent agenda, or if you have any questions, please let me know.
Zito moves approval.
All right, we have a motion.
With your change.
Second.
All right, in a second. If there is no further discussion, Ms. Webb, can you go ahead and call the roll?
Thank you very much. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Gil Cabrera.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Campillo.
Aye.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Chair Vargas.
Vargas, aye.
Thank you. For East County, Councilmember Mendoza.
Aye.
Thank you. For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Montgomery Stepp.
Yes.
Thank you. For North County Coastal, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
Thank you. For North County Inland, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, aye.
Thank you. For North County Transit District, Councilmember Edson.
Edson, aye.
Thank you. For the Port of San Diego, Commissioner Benelli.
Benelli, yes.
Thank you. And for South County, Councilmember Sankey.
Sankey, yes.
Thank you very much, and that passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right, moving on to reports. Item number 4 is the 2021 Regional Plan Role of Technology. I'm going to go ahead and ask Mr. Ray Major. So he's going to share with us the technology trends that have disrupted transportation and opportunities to leverage technology in support of our goals for fast, fair, and clean mobility. Mr. Major.
Good morning, Chair Vargas, Vice Chair Campillo, members of the board. I'm honored to present to you today the presentation that we're doing on technology trends in transportation. So just give me a second so that I can bring up my screen. And I'm here with Antoinette Meyer, the Director of Mobility and Innovation, and Dr. Sanjeev Gupta, formerly from Qualcomm, I keep forgetting Qualcomm, who's our entrepreneur in residence, and he worked on autonomous vehicles and has been a great help to us as we've gone forward with understanding how technology will impact transportation in the future. And I'd like to just lay the foundation a little bit about what's happening and why it's so important for us to really consider technology when it comes to transportation. But to understand this, we really need to understand how the world changes in terms of innovations. These represent long cycles of innovation. They're about 50 years long, and they really build upon each other. And any innovation that happens in one cycle really couldn't have happened with the innovations that happened in the cycles before. And so when you do this, what ends up happening is there's a trigger like electrification or railroads or the Industrial Revolution, and it triggers a whole host of things in the economy that we've never seen before. So you can consider how the steam engine was the catalyst for the Industrial Revolution, for instance, or how the automobile fundamentally changed the way that we started to travel in the beginning of the 20th century. These technologies are called, they're disruptive technologies. And what happens is that they reorganize the entire economy and they create these new value chains. And so what we're going through one right now, and that's what we're looking at. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more. But our job here is really not to predict the future, but our job here at Sandag is to prepare and be ready to adopt to these technological breakthroughs as they happen, because they will happen. Believe it or not, the computer age, the one that we mainly grew up in as living in this particular century, is waning. And we're actually now at the beginning of the 6th cycle of innovation, which began in 2010. And this cycle is dominated by information, communication, the Internet of Things, big data, biotechnology, drone technology, that type of thing. And the technology that we're going to be discussing today as it relates to transportation it's been invented in the last 10 to 20 years, but it's fundamentally going to change how we move from point A to point B. And so when you take a look, for instance, at the adoption curve of technology, this is what has happened in the United States. And just consider the technologies that are in blue for a second. Like, for instance, the automobile, which is in that dark blue. It took almost 60 years for us to really adopt automobiles fully, so that it was kind of ubiquitous in the economy, and almost everybody who was driving in an automobile, about 80% penetration. Took almost 60 years. But take a look at the orange and the yellow lines on the right-hand side. Those are the things from this last cycle, the computer age, and it's taking us about 10 years to get to 80% adoption in things like, for instance, the cell phone. Okay, so things are happening much more quickly than they've ever happened before, and this pace of change is going to continue to increase. So this just kind of shows you the comparison between the automobile and the technologies that we've been looking at recently. So I'd like to talk just briefly about 3 things that have to do with technology that have completely revolutionized the way that we think about the world. And these things are going to fundamentally change the way that we think about transportation in the future. So if you look at the Internet of Things, the Internet of Things is really objects that are connected to the internet, and then they can transfer information back and forth. The first non-computer that was ever hooked to the internet was a toaster. And that was done in 1990. That's the same year that Madonna released Vogue, or MC Hammer released You Can't Touch This. I mean, that was like, that's not that long ago for some of us, okay? But what happened is that researchers were able to send a signal to the toaster, and that toaster was able to then put the bread down, toast it, and eject it. But you still had to put the bread in manually. Okay, so that's where we were at. And that was only 1990, but take a look at what's happened roughly 30 years later. We have over 46 billion devices connected to the internet. That's nearly 6 devices for every human being on the face of the earth. It's unbelievable. And this connectivity and these things talking to each other has limitless potential. It really does. And it's churning out a significant amount of data. It's unbelievable amounts of data. And this data we refer to as big data. These are these large, complex data sets that are now being just generated every second of the day. And this information is something that we can use to help understand how people move around the region. And if you've seen some of the presentations I've done on the regional plan, I show you how we use cell phone data, for instance, to figure out where people are going to, so that we can design a more optimal system. Data collection has been around with us for many, many years. In the 19th century, the Hollerith card, or the punch card, was invented as a way to record data for the census. And what would have taken 8 years to count in 1880, the 1880 census, was able to be done in 3 months because of the advancements in technology. But what this did was this sparked a century of improvement in technology. And so what's happened is that now we've created all of this data, and what we need to do is somehow be able to analyze it. It's impossible for humans to now analyze the amount of data that's coming in. And so this sparked artificial intelligence and machine learning. And artificial intelligence is really it's a computer system that's able to perform a task that usually requires a human to make to do that. So for instance, visual perception or speech recognition or decision making. And so you ask why, how is that important to transportation? Well, if you think about the history of what and how quickly this is developing. 10 years ago, you may have remembered that IBM's Watson computer won a game of Jeopardy. And that was like a really big thing that you heard about, that a computer was able to beat a human in a game of Jeopardy. And then the same year, Apple released Siri. So now all of a sudden you're talking to your phone and it's now your new interface. A year later, Google had a project that was able to train a computer to recognize a cat. Okay, this is not that long ago. This is 9 years ago, but that's a huge leap forward for a machine that can only deal with ones and zeros. And I know these seem like really simplistic examples, but they're revolutionary because they're the type of leaps forward that are required really to enable us to have driverless vehicles recognize an object on the road as a person and then apply the brakes. Okay, so this all comes together: Internet of Things, big data, artificial intelligence. So we've moved in the last 30 years from a toaster being connected to now modern cars that can almost drive themselves if we allowed them to. We have billions of objects communicating in the world. And the real question here is, how do we leverage these technologies as a transportation planning agency? Well, the answer is really embedded in the 5 big moves. And it's included in what we call the next operating system that you've heard us talk about a lot. And I'm going to hand it over now to Antoinette Meyer, the Director of Mobility and Innovation, to really walk us through how we're implementing these things in our regional plan.
Thank you, Ray, and good morning, Transportation Committee members. So these 3 enabling technologies, IoT, big data, and artificial intelligence, have completely disrupted transportation as we've known it for many years. The car itself was a very disruptive technology. You can just imagine what it must have been like when cars were introduced to streets that weren't designed for them, competing for space with horses and buggies and streetcars and people walking and biking. It must have been quite an experience. But technology is disrupting transportation once again. And that's the reason why there are so many headlines on a daily basis about transportation. There's not really a day that goes by anymore when transportation isn't making the news. And the focus of those headlines and the focus of the presentation today is really on 3 trends. That's mobility as a service, vehicle technologies, which are smart cars that are clean, and smart cities and transportation systems. So what is mobility as a service? Simply put, it is a paradigm shift from vehicle ownership being a necessity to easy access to an array of public and private transportation services through a single application and subscription service. For vehicle technologies, we're really focused on 3 technologies specifically: zero emission vehicles, connected vehicles, and autonomous vehicles. And then the 3rd trend, which is smart cities and transportation systems, that really is about the digital infrastructure that gets more efficient operations out of our existing investments in hard infrastructure. So mobility as a service is most clearly seen in the explosion of app-enabled shared mobility services that really took us by storm over the last decade, starting with ride-hailing companies, that's Uber and Lyft. 10 years ago, they weren't on our radar at all, but as of 2019, Uber alone was doing 19 million trips per day. The scooters and the bikes showed up on our streets literally overnight back in 2017, and within 2 years, they were giving 136 million rides. And then microtransit, which is on-demand, kind of right-sized shuttle services, are really taking hold across the country. And you have successful microtransit now operating in cities as small as West Sacramento. Vehicle technologies are developing at a different pace. The transition to zero-emission vehicles has been incredibly slow. In fact, the first electric motor was developed almost 200 years ago, but now we have really ambitious climate change policy that's driving the technology forward. And this year, almost every major US auto manufacturer announced that they would be selling only zero-emission vehicles within a short time frame. Despite the safety benefits of fully connected cars, the transition has been very slow. And this is in large part because the regulatory environment is lagging. There isn't policy like we have today for other safety features, seat belts and airbags for connected vehicles and for other types of advanced safety features in cars. But cars are getting smarter and safer. 41 million vehicles are now embedded with cellular, and there are many new cars that include advanced driver assistance features that are improving safety. Projections suggest that autonomous vehicles won't be widely available for at least a decade. There is still a lot of piloting and testing that's needed, and AVs will likely roll out in a shared fleet that operates within a defined geographic area. Nevertheless, 55 companies now have permits in the state of California to test autonomous vehicles with a safety driver in the car on California roads, and actually 8 companies now have permits to test completely driverless autonomous vehicles on California roads. That means no safety driver is required in the car. So that's a big step forward. And then the last trend is smart cities and transportation systems. And this is connected infrastructure embedded with sensors that can communicate and share data with each other, providing us with real-time information on conditions. And this can include streetlights, buildings, roadways. The technology exists today. You heard about it from Ray Major, but the adoption of the technology by the public sector and the investment in that digital infrastructure is not yet widespread. But when we do decide to start to make those investments, there's a lot to gain in terms of efficiency, energy efficiency, sustainability, better traffic operations, improved public safety, and of course, customer service. So all of these innovations are really being driven by the private sector, and they will continue to be. We don't see it as government's role to compete with the private sector and try to develop our own technology solutions. We are not very good at that. But we do see ourselves as collaborators and regulators who can partner with the private sector to really harness the benefits of these technological innovations. We need to develop policy that can help guide it towards our goals. Without policy and partnerships, these innovations can introduce chaos into our local streets and roads. I think the scooters and the bikes, the dockless scooters and bikes are an example of that. But if we're overly restrictive, then we miss out on the opportunities and we fall behind. So we need to be flexible. We need to develop policy that focuses on the outcomes that we all want to achieve in partnership with the private sector. And because public-private partnerships are really part of our future when it comes to transportation, we formed a vision advisory panel of industry experts to really help us when we were putting together the vision for the 2021 regional plan. These were leaders from companies like Qualcomm and Verizon and Ford Smart Mobility and Cubic and Too Simple. And they helped us to understand what technology could do for us, how it could help us to achieve our goals for having a faster and fairer and cleaner transportation system. We also brought on an entrepreneur in residence, and that is Sanjeev Nanda. Sanjeev is a strategic advisor to Sandag staff and leadership, all of you, on data and technology. Sanjeev has over 200 granted patents and more than 25 years in leadership and research and development with Qualcomm, and before that, Bell Labs. So I think it goes without saying that we are incredibly fortunate to have Sanjeev as part of the team. And it's a great pleasure to introduce him to you today so that he can share with you his perspective on all of the different opportunities and challenges that technology present and all of the things that we need to be considering as planners and policymakers moving forward. So Sanjeev, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Antoinette. My pleasure to be here. It's been about 18 to maybe 21 months since I've been with Sandag. It's been, I think, anyway, it's been fascinating learning experience for me. I've been in technology for my entire career, and realizing what role technology can play in this, in what we're trying to accomplish here has been pretty exciting. And I'm going to elaborate on two things. One, what Antoinette talked about this, what's happening between what we need to do, how in these three tracks that we're discussing, how technology and regulation need to kind of come together to achieve what we're what we need to achieve. And the second sort of thing that I want to talk about is that we don't have, it's not like, so when I when I joined, Sandag told me that we're doing this 2035 or 2050 planning. And I was thinking, well, at Qualcomm, or in my entire career in R&D, we were always looking from 3 years out to maybe 5 to 7. Industry doesn't necessarily look out 10 years, and so how was I going to help Sandag? But I realized that as we were working towards this, it's imminent. All these technologies, and so as I talk through these, you'll see that every technology that we're talking about is imminent. It's not like we have 10, 15 years to kind of twiddle our thumbs here. So so let's talk about mobility as a service. Well, that's an example of a technology where when you get it right, and I think Ray spoke about this, when you get it right, adoption happens. Just adoption just happens, and so that's been our experience. You see that in using Lyft and Uber, the adoption of electric scooters, electric bikes were talked about a little while back. So adoption happens when we get the technology right. And the good news, the opportunity has been that it's being used by underserved communities, by underserved regions of San Diego County. And we've done our own study of usage of Uber and Lyft in our region, and that's been published. And the numbers are very promising. So we find that the pooling in San Diego County has been higher than some of the other cities in California. We found that the Uber and Lyft are used for travel by low-income communities, that people are willing to pool for lower price, and it is used by our population that does not have access to vehicles. So it's filling an important gap that is not filled otherwise. However, we have also seen that congestion has gone up because of Uber. This is recognized throughout the country, as well as in particular in San Diego County. So drivers waiting for rides are driving around to wait for their ride or search for rides, and so on and so forth. And so they're increasing travel that is unnecessary. Usage is up during peak periods, so that increases congestion, and it's not being used for transit. On the other hand, some other shared mobility services, like what is called micro mobility, like electric bikes and e-scooters and so on and so forth, those can be really valuable as an access to transit, because they increase what we refer to as walk shed. So instead of being able to walk half a mile to the trolley, you may be willing to take a bike or a e-scooter to a longer distance. So sharing and pooling is the big opportunity for these technologies. And the basic problem is that they came faster than we could do regulation and policy. And so regulation and policy in this case is lagging the technology, and that has led to increased congestion, the picture of the scooters lying around, and all these issues that we had over the last couple of years when e-scooters first arrived, and so on. So we need to get ahead on this regulation. And the great news is, I'm staying on this slide a little bit longer. I'll try to speed along in a moment. But the great news is that that because of these app-enabled technologies, there's a lot of potential for data to inform our planning and inform operations and integrate services so that people can access a combination of services better, and so on. So a lot of interesting, important work is happening at something called the Open Mobility Foundation. We're specifying this mobility data standard, which can help inform planners and operation of mobility services. So that's sort of that's something that is happening. On the other hand, there's a big challenge is that the big mobility companies, Uber and Lyft, are unwilling to share data, and there's an opportunity to do more regulation there. I'll move on, but you can see that it's a very this mobility as a service has a very rich potential for us in the region, and we need to be involved in regulating and policy. And next slide is using that one. Thank you. So the next the story is nicer in the zero emission vehicle space, where in some ways technology has progressed, as have regulation. And so we're proceeding in regulation and technology in lockstep, where everybody is charging ahead to this 2035 goal. Transportation has a very significant impact on emissions. Maybe 40% of our emissions are from transportation, and so making progress on that is very impactful. So it's great that technology and regulation are in lockstep, charging towards this 2035 goals and so on. We have some challenges in trying to get enough charging deployed, charging networks deployed. We have challenges in having chargers, apartment dwellers and so on. We need to solve issues related to that. And so there's also some other exciting technology stuff that is happening. Well, we need to worry about battery technology progress, getting batteries to be lighter and with more capacity and more range. There's also interesting opportunities with dynamic electric charging that we're investigating, and I'm sure you'll get to hear more about it in the coming year. And so that's kind of what the threat is, that if some of these technologies fall short, we may not achieve these goals, but it's exciting times in zero emission vehicles. On the connected and autonomous front, the big opportunity that we talked about is eliminating, getting to zero fatalities on our roads, protecting our vulnerable road users, our bicyclists and pedestrians from distracted drivers. This is a huge goal and opportunity for the technology, and the investments have been, on both on the connected vehicle front and the autonomous vehicle front, that industry investments have been substantial. So lots of great progress. And I was for 3 years I was working at Qualcomm on autonomous vehicle technology, and so I'm well versed in understanding how progress is happening and how far we are and how close we are. So in terms of how close we are, the kinds of safety technologies that are available today are amazing. You can equip vehicles with up to 10 cameras and look all around you. I used to joke about how the next generation would kind of wonder what a blind spot is, for example. And so, all those technologies exist. There's an opportunity for regulators to mandate safety technologies, just like we mandated airbags and seat belts and so on. There's no reason why we can't mandate, lane keeping, or mandate rear. We also mandated rear cameras and so on. So there's an opportunity there for highly automated safety technologies. And there's an opportunity for connected vehicles as well, where basically one of the reasons that connected vehicles have not got deployed is that there's been some confusion on the regulation side about what technology everyone should use, and as well as a lack of investment in the infrastructure that connected vehicles can speak to, like signalized intersections and so on and so forth. And then the basic threat is that if we don't make sure that autonomous vehicles, when they come, are pooled and shared we're going to end up with even more gridlock. We would end up with a lot more gridlock because people will drive longer distances in autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles will roam around on their own, trying to pick up rides, and so on. And so you end up with worse gridlock with connected and autonomous vehicle technology that is unregulated. So finally, let's talk about the third trend, which is smart cities and transportation systems, and the opportunities for improved sustainability, safety, convenience are just enormous and well recognized. And the technologies have progressed, as Ray mentioned, Internet of Things. I mean, sensing of anything and everything is smart cities is available now. The deployment of wireless infrastructure and fiber for carrying this sensed information back to data centers, everything is, and very, very accurate geolocation. So all these technologies are available. So technology is not lacking. The opportunity is there. What's lacking is a few things. While industry has progressed dramatically in being data driven, the smart cities have struggled with achieving these data capabilities. So as cities become better at data management, data governance, data literacy, and data capability, being able to do machine learning and AI that Ray mentioned, the opportunities are enormous. There is also a very significant issue with making sure that as these technologies arrive and data becomes part of smart cities, that we make sure that we don't leave people behind who either don't have access to data or smartphones or just lack data literacy. So both on the front of our population, as well as our agency and city staff, I think we need to get more literate with data. And so if we don't do that, then smart cities will remain just a vision and not reality. And I think this same thing applies in a narrower way in some ways. You can think of smart cities as a broader context of what data can do for cities. And if the next OS is primarily, I would say, applied to transportation, what I just said about data. So what you need is there's infrastructure can be sensed. The public and private providers of let's say Uber and Lyft or our transit agencies, they can all generate data about the services, and the people can get to use these services in an integrated way. So the data needs to flow between people and the services. For data to flow, there need to be data standards. I come from a domain, at Qualcomm and Bell Labs, where standards have driven the technology, our communication technology. So I understand well that standards are critical for data to be used. And then once data is being used, you establish metrics and goals, and then you can measure them. And then you can use that for not just for planning. First, we use them for planning. We use them for operations to make seamless and efficient operations, and then we deliver services that people desire. And most critically, having data allows you to develop policies that can be measured, and you can measure against. And so when when you have public-private partnerships that we're talking about, where the private sector is deploying technologies and services, and the agencies like SANDAG have goals for the public good, that we satisfy sustainability and equity needs and access for people and so on. So to match those goals, the public goals, to match it to the private company ROI, you need to develop this regulation framework. And I think I'm really excited about kind of being in the middle of all that. So that's all I have to say. I think the next OS is this data exchange and data utilization framework is how we should be thinking about it. And I'm going to ask Antoinette to take over to tell you how even in the last year and in the coming year, we're making so much progress on getting Next OS planned and deployed in the future. So Antoinette. Sorry, I took too long.
Thank you, Sanjeev. So I think for many, the Next OS has been a little bit of a mystery. So the intent here is to help sort of demystify it for you. I'm going to just provide some practical examples of the Next OS and some of the work that we're doing around planning for some use cases, starting with smart intersections. So historically, signalized intersections have really been focused on moving high volumes of cars as quickly as possible, reducing delays for vehicles. And this is often to the detriment of pedestrians or vulnerable populations like seniors or people with disabilities that may need a little bit more time to get through those intersections. A smart and connected transportation system, intersection system, collects and processes data from traffic signal controllers, from sensors, from connected vehicles, and that allows it to monitor and adjust signal operations and respond to the needs of different people and different modes of transportation. Detection technology can also increase the crossing time and create a safer environment for people on bikes and pedestrians. Sensors can prioritize connected transit along an entire corridor, giving it priority so that it's a little bit faster and more competitive. Sensors also can provide real-time data to operators and planners, so you can start to identify unsafe intersections where there's a lot of crashes or near misses, and you can make improvements to those intersections quickly to help meet your Vision Zero goals. So it's the Next OS that's aggregating all of that data and providing us with this information, making this system of smart intersections possible. So let's talk about the curb. Today's curbs are primarily used for parking cars, but there are a lot of new demands that are turning curbs into very valuable real estate. So curbs are now needed for passenger pickup and drop off, for all of these different transportation services and public transit, commercial deliveries. I mean, there are more commercial deliveries than ever, and there's huge demand at the curb for that. They are where we put safe infrastructure for bikes and for micromobility services. And they have become a very popular venue for outdoor dining during the pandemic. And I think that's a trend that we're going to continue to see into the future. So the curb's a hot commodity, but the way that we manage the curbs has not changed in the face of all of these new demands. We still use paint and static signs that can cause confusion. And this is where the Next OS can come in and help. It can collect and process curb data from sensors and connected vehicles so that cities can start to respond to and accommodate all of those competing demands, being more flexible with how the curb is used. So think about a really chaotic area like the San Ysidro Port of Entry today. There's taxis, there's jitneys, there's bikes, there's ride-hail vehicles and transit. A curb management system can really orchestrate all of the pickup and drop off and direct vehicles and people to safe spaces. Let's look at transit. You know, there's years of research that shows that one of the biggest barriers for people to take transit and a frustration for people who rely on transit is convenience and reliability. People want dependable, real-time information, and they want service that is fast and efficient. So better data and analytics that is provided through the Next operating system can really help to make transit services more reliable and more convenient. It allows operators to make quick decisions to improve on-time performance or change routing or eliminate stops to avoid unnecessary delays. Data that's collected from vehicle sensors can help with predictive maintenance and avoid unexpected repairs. And then data can be shared with third-party apps so that transit can be integrated into an individual's trip with the same ease as ordering an Uber or Lyft. So we have a lot of different activities that are underway to bring the Next OS to life. We've done a lot of the technical planning that's required for that regional smart intersection system and curb management system. We've recently updated the regional intelligent transportation system architecture, the federally required ITS architecture. And this really describes how all of these different systems are connected and can communicate with each other. And accompanying that is what we call our transportation systems management and operations strategy. This is how we work together, the people, the process, the policy that's needed to make this work. We got a very significant grant from the US Department of Transportation to deploy Next OS in the border region. So we'll be kicking that project off later this summer. We have a major EV charger incentive program, and we're making really good progress with getting the EV infrastructure that's going to be needed to support the clean transportation future. And then broadband connectivity, that is just essential for any of this stuff to work. So we're working on our digital equity strategy and action plan, and we'll have a roadmap for how we build out the communications infrastructure that is going to be needed for everything to work together. So lots of work is underway, and members of my team are going to be coming back in the coming months to share progress on these efforts with you. I'm going to wrap up the presentation now and hand it back to the chair and invite my colleagues over so that we can respond to any questions that you might have. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for such a thorough presentation. Are there any public comments on this item?
No, Chair, no hands from the public.
Any member comments? Mr. Sankey?
I apologize, Chair, one hand just went up.
All right.
Jeff Dosick, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, thank you very much. It's really a great presentation, and it's coming back to my original statement is the importance of the communication with SANDAG and San Diego street engineers, how we as e-bike users or bike users using the trolley or the coaster and everything that SANDAG has been providing, which are great bike paths, it's that last little bit, just like was described on the curves. We need to get back what we had. It's been chopped up. And when I'm going to the planning group meetings, everything is talking about 5 to 10 years. And in certain sections of San Diego, we had and still have bike lanes, but at the curbs, because of all the traffic that's in the area from all the building, it's just cut. And that's really it. I come from a process engineering background with companies in Detroit and Munich. And I look at printed circuit board manufacturing the same as the traffic. And you can have these great systems built, just like the trolley or the coaster. And if it's not connected smoothly, within a very short period of time, all these investments, people will be constantly talking and pointing, well, why are you putting all that money into bike lanes when I don't see people using them? Well, a high percentage of people won't use them if they're not connected quickly. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Sankey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning once again. When I was listening to this, I was very excited. Antoinette and Ray and Sanjeev, you brought such amazing technologies, and the fact that they're going to start being implemented in the border area there is really exciting, because that is an area where bringing order to the chaos would really make a difference for our region. And I'm looking forward to seeing that implementation. Ray, you touched on the connected toaster, and sadly, my mind went to how many Bitcoins it was going to take me to get my toaster back from the hacker. And in a broader sense, the cybersecurity risks as we get further into this integration of technology into what has been sadly a poorly managed transportation system that will benefit from technology. But can you comment, Sanjeev, please, on the necessity and the efforts and hopefully the success of whether this modified blockchain or whatever magic sauce is going to keep this system from being so vulnerable as we've seen of recent incidents where we've had pipelines and hospital systems have significant problems with the hacking.
Yeah, so I think great point. if we are going to become a data-driven organization and having data be part of our operations, then we need to absolutely be worried about cybersecurity, and that's absolutely key. And the way to do that is to build our capabilities to becoming a data savvy organization. And basically, you start with data literacy, and so you start with data governance and data literacy, and we are well on our way to starting those initiatives. So I think you raise a great point. I think as we need to kind of be working on the technologies and regulations and policies, and in parallel become data experts, just like private industry does, and so on. And so we can't say that until we are completely solve the cybersecurity, we should not worry about what technologies can bring to our transportation. So that's kind of my view of it. Maybe Ray wants to add.
Well, thank you. First of all, I'd like to apologize to Sanjeev. I think I misspoke when I spoke his last name. Sanjeev Nanda is, I knew that. I just don't know why I didn't say that. But yeah, cybersecurity is interesting because when we look at the sixth Kondratiev curve, which I was talking about earlier, one of the things that we look at is like, where are jobs going to be created? So there's going to be jobs created in artificial intelligence, drone technology, cybersecurity, because cyber crime is probably the fastest growing new industry that's been created in this latest cycle. And so there's a tremendous amount that we need to keep track of. I don't think that here at Sandag, we're doing a tremendous amount to try to make sure that our data is secure, that our computers are secure. So we are focused on it. And I think as we go forward, it's part of what we're going to be looking at in the future. But as an agency, we're working very hard at making sure that these things don't affect us over here, and that they don't affect any type of programs we might roll out from a transportation perspective. And the other thing is that a lot of what we talk about here is not Sandag creating the code or the technology. This is bringing together private industry and the innovations that are happening in the next decade. And so we really need to work with those agencies and those businesses that are bringing those to fruition to make sure that they're bringing secure software into the marketplace so that we don't end up with any type of cyber crimes that would impact our transportation system.
Right. I think we can not do one without the other. You can't have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich without the peanut butter, without the
absolutely
jelly. So sure, keep that cybersecurity element tag teaming with the.
Thank you. Councilmember Zito?
Oh, I think Gary was ahead of me, but I'm happy to go. Thanks.
Okay. I it's really hard for me to see who puts their hand up before, so whoever wants to go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead. And yeah, thanks again for the presentation. And thanks, Chair. It was really, it's very interesting for me to see this type of stuff and see what we're looking at and planning and getting excited about how it's going to help our transportation network. I get a couple of questions, one of which is just around the collaborations and regulations, and Sanjeev talked about it a little bit with respect to data. Do we anticipate as an organization being or our type of organization being in standards groups driving standards? Are we going to develop that type of expertise, or are we going to participate, or are we just going to try to watch? And how do we go about doing that?
So great question again. We about a year ago, we joined the Open Mobility Foundation. It's a very exciting organization. I hope many of you will also go look it up. It was started initially by LA DOT, and Celita Reynolds, started some projects, and then it became big enough that dozens of cities, maybe 40 or more cities across the country have joined, and we are participating. There are three members from Sandag who attend regularly. The first thing they took on was micromobility, regulation of e-scooters. And it's very, very interesting what they're doing. They are not only tracking locations of scooters and making sure that you can specify to the providers geographies and coverage and how many scooters can be in particular areas and so on and so forth. But going to the next level of digitization where cities such as the city of San Diego can actually digitally specify policies and update policies and verify compliance with policies digitally. So a lot of data standardization is occurring there. So we're participating to some extent. Participation becomes more valuable once you have kind of a closed loop where you're also part of the implementation. So as our city partners start implementing some of these with their providers, we get more and more involved. Just want to say two more things. The OMF has started new groups to look at curb and specify curb management, as well as to look at passenger services next. So a lot of activity.
There are significant private companies involved in that body. I'm not familiar with that particular
So
body.
on the e-scooter side, all the private providers are part of it. The cities are part of it, so that's great. On the curb as well, private companies are participating, including, and then on passenger vehicles, autonomous vehicle companies are participating. So there's a level of activity. It is also equally true that Uber and Lyft are trying to not participate.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay, that's what I figured. Okay, thanks. The next question I had was about, and this probably would be a very lengthy discussion, so we don't have to do too much of it right now. But just in general, I'm curious what our philosophy is about assumptions around cost for maintaining our services and data going forward. Being in the private sector in this space and doing a cloud shift, my prior employer was using primarily Amazon for hosting services, and our Amazon expenses were going up nearly exponentially every year, right? And that's and in particular, when you deal with things like it's going to be really interesting. Like right now, today, we use cell phones, and they're updatable, but in general, after about 8 years, they become useless, right? And you have to get a new cell phone. It's going to be harder to get people to buy new cars every 8 years or new transportation vehicles every 8 years. And so you have this huge requirement to maintain all of this cloud infrastructure that's backwards compatible to some degree. And I'm curious what our assumptions are right now around the 5 big moves and our $160 billion budget of what is our growth and what are we expecting to own there?
Yes, so we did come up with rough order of magnitude cost estimates for the next operating system, and we'll share those with you after the meeting. I think that's the best way to go about it, and then we can have a conversation, in more detail, if you'd like.
Okay, that'd be great. And I just and then I guess one last question, two more questions. One of which is just coordinating with cities right now. Are we expecting that to be more mandatory? So, for example, every city today has its own mobile app, and these mobile apps are not sharing data in any way whatsoever. They're not. I can't go take my app from Solana Beach and go to Encinitas and report an issue in Encinitas and understand what's going on there. Do we expect to be mandating certain things in that particular space?
Well, I don't know that we're going to mandate, but now that the board has given us approval to really build out our data science group, we're going to be doing a lot more as a regional agency to try to coordinate region-wide all of these different technologies that are happening, especially as it relates to data, because people travel across the jurisdictional lines all of the time, and so there is some stuff that makes sense for us to coordinate. And so I think this falls into that category, and I think that in the next year you'll see a lot of progress in that direction, but I don't know that there's a mandate to do it.
Well, I'm kind of curious. So, for example, today, just to give an example, like the meters that we have at the freeway on ramps are generally controlled by Caltrans. The lights, the lights in our city are controlled by the cities. They don't talk and coordinate because we can pick our own systems today. So is there going to be some mandate that says all of this infrastructure has to be the same?
So, and we're going to come back. Actually, you're setting me up really nicely, Councilmember.
Okay.
So we're going to come back in 2 weeks and we're going to talk about the new ITS architecture. And that's what that really is. It talks about all of the different kind of disparate silo systems that we have on the ground today and how we have to connect and integrate those systems. And then the other piece that we'll be talking about is what we call TSMO strategy, another terrible acronym, Transportation System Management Operations. We didn't make that one up. That's the US DOT, but that talks about the policies that we need to put in place, how we kind of work together, the processes that need to be put into place to make everything work as a system. So we've worked with staff from all of the agencies on both of these efforts. We did a training recently on the ITS architecture. We have a couple others that are coming up. So yes, we are definitely working on, I wouldn't call it a mandate per se or a requirement, but we're putting the architecture in place and the policies and processes in place.
Okay, great.
If I may add to just Councilmember Zito, I really appreciate your question, Councilmember, because just to the cost and whether it's a mandate or not. I think Ray, Major, Sanjeev, and Antoinette tried to tell you a while back in a presentation that if we want to do the Internet of Everything and the open data and the big data, we need to be willing to put the resources. I mean, this next operating system is not going to work without a mechanism of instant dynamic data processing. And that's one of the reasons I think Sanjeev and Antoinette is talking. We're still designing these mechanisms so we do it. But honestly, to your question, an excellent question, whether it's a mandate or not, I don't think this is going to work without somehow a rule that it's not going to work. I mean, I mean the easy political things to say no, we're not going to mandate. It's not going to work. So, and I don't know who mandates, whether it's us, state agencies, the cities, the county, I don't know, but some kind of coordinated processes has to take place for this to work. Because you can't have it each city, and once you move beyond the city boundary, you have to do all things all over again. But that was an excellent question.
It would be pretty funny if my car stopped working as soon as I hit the city.
That's right. That's right.
So, colleagues Edson and Benelli, and thank you, Councilmember Cito, for the questions. Our next presenter actually has a hard stop at 10:45. So do you mind if we go to have her present? Can you hold on your questions and we can come back after her? I just want to make sure we have enough time for the next item while Ms. Cooney is still around. All right, I appreciate that. All right, let's go to item number 5, which is, and I know there's a public member. Did you want to go ahead and, okay, I think they left. All right, we'll hold on to your questions. We'll come back to everyone, okay? Thank you for that. Item number 5 is the proposed fiscal year 2022 Transit Agency operating budget. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Sandy Craig.
Okay, thank you. SANDAG is responsible for approving the transit agency budgets for funding, which has been delegated to the Transportation Committee as part of Board Policy 1. In February, SANDAG provided the transit agencies with funding estimates, which they used as input for their budget development process. Attachments 1 and 2 contain narrative and numerical summaries of key budget information as presented by MTS and NCTD. The MTS Board of Directors approved their fiscal year 22 budget on May 13th, and NCTD Board of Directors approved theirs yesterday on June 17th. The recommendation today will be for the Transportation Committee to approve MTS and NCTD's fiscal year 22 budgets for funding. And here's Sharon Cooney from MTS and Yoon Park Lynch from NCTD to give presentations for their respective agencies.
Good morning, Chair Vargas and committee members. Thank you so much for taking me out of turn. I will presume that SANDAG's going to put up my PowerPoint. Next slide. So what I'm going to do is do a few of the highlights from our year. Obviously, COVID-19 is a shadow over everything this past year. I do want to mention that MTS was able to retain 96% of its service levels during the pandemic, and this is really the highest in the nation. We also wanted to recognize that our communities really needed the services during this time because mostly we were carrying essential workers and people getting to medical appointments and, the people who really depend on transit every day. We also had safety measures for our passengers, and we really promoted the Clean Ride campaign because we felt like that would be a way for people to feel safe as they maneuvered during this past year. And then our employees are always uppermost in our minds. We want to make sure they were safe. So we did a lot of things to help them. Really important programs like on-site testing. We propped that up right away in January as soon as that became available. And then we were able to get them vaccinations on site as well. So many of our workers were vaccinated very early. Next slide. Security and passenger safety reform. These were really critical things that we had to work on this year. We had started it pre-pandemic, but it was also something that we wanted to continue throughout this year. We hired a new director of transit security and passenger safety. He has a 30-year security background with New York's MTA and New Jersey Transit. So we wanted to kind of focus ourselves more on understanding passenger safety and not just, passenger safety, all passengers, anybody who was feeling unsafe due to perhaps our enforcement policies. We launched a fare evasion diversion program in September, which has been having some good success, helping those who perhaps can't buy the fare, but recognizing that perhaps we can do things without getting people into the criminal justice system. We also made changes to our use of force policies, and our new uniforms are reflective of the new approach to our security and passenger safety. We wanted to get away from the enforcement type of code enforcement type of policies and much more in line with helping people maneuver on our system. Next slide. Zero emission bus is a very big initiative for us. We have a plan that were approved last summer by our board, and it is going to show how we as a region are going to adopt zero emission bus technologies. We already have 8 electric buses in service, and we have 17 more on order. Notably, we will have the first first BRT, which is all electric, and that's going to be coming in 2022. Next slide. We also had a free ride day. This is reflective of, we wanted to make sure that people felt comfortable coming back to transit as we start opening up the economy. And this was a day to help people get to election locations. Some of you may recognize Mayor Sotelo Solis there in that picture. She helped us get out the word to people at our transit centers. We also have been handing out face masks and hand sanitizer, etc. That day, we were able to increase our ridership by 18% on trolley and 14% on bus. Next slide. Another campaign, because we wanted to assist businesses during this time frame, is our Eat, Shop, Play campaign. It's a free program to help small businesses, and if people use those businesses, spend $100, they get a free $72 monthly pass, and we're continuing this right now. 100+ businesses signed up, and it's really been a great way for us to support small businesses as the economy opens up. Next slide. We also wanted to make sure we maintained our commitment to community outreach and equity. We did continue meetings with our community advisory committee, and they advised us on topics from everything from safety and security reform to social equity. We plan on doing a social equity listening tour in FY22, and that is reflective of some of the feedback we were gaining from this group. Next slide. Building the Pronto system has been a big initiative for our agency this past year. We hired Init to develop and implement the system. It's a new account-based system. I think we've presented on this to this committee before. We plan on launching that September 1 of this year. And the board just approved yesterday that we are going to offer a free rides for anybody for the entire month of September who registers for Pronto. That will be a critical way for us, not only to increase ridership, but also to ease the transition from the Compass card to the Pronto. Next slide. Mid-Coast Trolley Extension, Hassan mentioned this in the beginning. We're all ready to go as we start opening that lineup and do the testing and familiarization training, and that will begin this summer. So we're excited, and we'll be seeing the first vehicle on the line at the end of this month. Next slide. We also were aware that we had to maintain good financial management. We did receive or finish the CAFR on time this year. And in recognition of the excellence of that document and the fact that we received no findings against us, we did receive the GFOA award for the 15th year in a row. Next slide. So now for our budget for FY22, you've already seen our CIP because it was included in the RTIP. The project needs for the next 5 years are expected to be about $840 million. We are only anticipating about $510 million. So we do have a deficit expected over the course of the next 5 years. But as we start seeing some of the infrastructure packages coming out of the state and federal government, we're hopeful that we'll bridge that gap somewhat. Next slide. So we have to mention this right up front. We have a significant structural deficit, meaning that the recurring expenses are exceeding our recurring revenues. And that's really driven by the fact that passenger revenue dropped so significantly due to the pandemic. If you don't make it up in passenger revenue, in order to make up for that loss of revenue, you have to make it up somewhere else. But that is hopefully going to be taken care of somewhat with the federal stimulus funding, at least for the next several years. Our expenses are higher due to the fact that we're adding the Mid-Coast Trolley, and also due to the fact that we're adding some other services as well that we were not running during the pandemic, including the express services on the I-15. We also are showing in this new operating budget for FY22 the rate increases within contracted services. We just signed this last year almost $1 billion 10-year operating contract with Transdev to continue operating half of our bus services. And this rate increase is directly related to things like the increases in minimum wage that have been approved, the fact that people are having a hard time competing for employees. And so the costs have risen in that contract from this past contract. So we are looking at our federal stimulus funding and trying to spread it out as long as we can. We are anticipating putting 172 million or spending 172 million of the 220 between FY20 and FY22. So about 48% of it. So that should leave us some to work with for the years after that. Next slide, please. So here is the combined budget with revenue and expenses. The bottom line you can look at is down below where you see that we need Federal CARES Act this year, 74 million. And then in our FY22 budget, we're budgeting for $80 million for that. Next slide. I wanted to show the projection as we move out in the years after we've exhausted our federal stimulus money. You can see that by FY26, we're anticipating about a $34 million deficit. A lot of things can change between now and then. As I said, there could be some funding, other funding sources, subsidies, but we could also potentially see passenger revenue coming back faster than we anticipate. And we are engaging in a really comprehensive retention and regaining of ridership. The plan is to try to get as many people back onto transit as quickly as possible. The expense growth average is about 3.5% per year. in these budgets. Next slide. I just threw this in here because we always give this comparison of our stats to other agencies. Unfortunately, this was pre-pandemic, so we can pretty much throw this out the window. I do want to mention to you that ridership right now is coming back. We had in May of this year ridership was 47% higher than it was last year. We carried 3.7 million passenger trips, and that equates to about 140,000 passenger trips a day. So we're hopeful that we will be regaining the ridership more quickly than we're budgeting. We're just trying to be conservative. And that is my final slide, so I can answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Let me first ask if there's any members of the public who have any questions, Madam Clerk, on this item.
No, Chair, I don't see any hands. Thank you.
All right, seeing none, Member Cabrera.
I'm sorry.
Thank you,
one
Chair.
hand is
Oh, go ahead.
We do have it. Go ahead.
Mike Bullock, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. That was an interesting presentation. I appreciate that. I heard the Pronto system is going to be used instead of the Compass card, and I heard equity mentioned. And so I want to read something from the California Democratic Party platform, which relates to this. It says, support the design and implementation of a single environmentally sound technology system that will collect and distribute fees for the use of roads, parking, and transit that is both economically fair and convenient and protects user privacy in the interests of low-income users. And so I don't want to talk about the parking and the road use charge, but I guess everyone knows that the state has proposed a means-based road use charge, and I assume that the SANDAG is actively supporting that and trying to get that to move fast as soon as possible. I talk about the car parking quite a bit and the fact that that should all be automated, similar to Uber. You know, you don't pay for your ride until you are at your destination, but the money flows out. It's automatic. And that's the way using the bus should be. You don't pay up front, but in all these systems, the users have an account established. Kind of like the grocery store that's going to be cashierless, and the system that they're going to have will just be just walk out. So, you know, you go into the store and you buy all the items you want and you walk out and put them on your bicycle and bicycle home. You will get a receipt. And so the bus should be that way, and all transit. It should be nothing really to do. And it should always be means-based. I mean, I just don't understand, you know, people think that, you know, the gas tax should be the same for everybody. And there's just no equity there. There's no acknowledgement that people have very little income, very little wealth, and need to travel. And so for a lot of people, that the bus should be rather expensive. Myself, as an example, you know, I drive my Tesla. My bicycle is my primary mode of transportation. But when I use the train, I should pay a lot of money for it, a lot of money. And when I drive my Tesla, I should pay a lot of money. All right, I've done well in life, and you know, so you need to up your game on this, on where we're headed with how we operate transit. And so those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Cabrera, and then Ms. Montgomery Steele.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question, and it's a little bit unrelated to the budget, but you had a slide and a comment on the fare diversion, the new sort of program that you had done in that. And one of the comments, or one of the points, was that the fine was lowered to $25. Two things. One is are we still going through the sort of court system to enforce that fine? And if so, do you know what the actual fine ends up being when you tag on all the court fees and county fees and every other fee that comes along with it. Because the fine used to be, I think I used to enforce these. So the fine used to be something like $75, but by the time the person was in court, it was like, north of 140, if I recall. So I'm just curious what the actual impact on the person is. If I can get that information, that'd be great.
Yeah, so what we do with the fair diversion program is we first allow when the patron is asked for a fare and they don't have one, we allow them to go ahead and purchase a fare on the spot. And then if they don't want to purchase a fare, then they can go into the diversion program, and they have 120 days to pay the $25. And they have a number of ways to do that. If they can't pay the $25, they can tell us that they can't and they would like to do community service. So we let them do community service. And then in the event that the 120 days comes up, we then do send it to the courts, and then the courts resolve it. We also have a system as well, though, where if it does go to the courts and they do come forward and say, hey, can I pay the $25? I forgot about this or whatever. Then we petition the court to ask them to cancel that citation. And so we've actually been very successful with the courts. The courts are understanding. They get that there's people who just at the moment, for whatever reason in their life, just couldn't pay that. And so we have been successful in that. I don't know exactly what the court fees are, but I understand that it's somewhere upwards of in the 200 plus range. So it is a very pricey. And then there are other options once you do get into the court system. The homeless court, for instance, can do away with any of these citations. We support people who get into these programs when they've decided they want to kind of turn their life around and they need to get rid of the citations in order to do that so they can rent homes, et cetera. So we do support that kind of extrajudicial type of program.
Just one quick suggestion is, so I sat as a judge pro tem, so I issued some of these fines, and the judges have total discretion on the fines. And so something that might be to think about is to maybe do a little bit of an information campaign to all those judges, particularly if it ultimately gets to them, just to make sure that they all know they have discretion, but sometimes they don't think about just how impactful those fines can be, particularly when you sort of lever it up with all the court fees. I mean, it's insane when you're looking at a original $75 fine that ends up becoming a $240 fine for somebody that couldn't pay a $3 fare. So just something to think about in terms of just an information campaign for them.
Thank you. Councilmember Montgomery Step.
Thank you, Chair Vargas. I don't have much to say. I just want to commend Ms. Cooney and MTS staff for your work on this budget. It's been a hard year for all of us, particularly our transportation agencies. And so recognizing the structural deficit, I still want to say thank you for all the work that you have done. And also the work you've done around the fair diversion program, revamping our public security philosophy at MTS, balancing, the need for everyone to feel safe, and that means different things to different people. So thank you for everything, and I would move the item if that is appropriate at this time. I don't know if NTC is doing a presentation.
It is appropriate. Thank you. We have a motion, and then let me turn Mr. Campillo.
Thank you, Chair Vargas. Thank you, Ms. Cooney, for your presentation. Just wanted to call out one particular item I saw, that the 5-year outlook for MTS lists potential mitigation measures for future deficits. One being listed is raises to passengers. Just want to reiterate my concern about that potential. I know that many times at this committee and at the board of directors, that is always a very it's a hesitant measure to take, understanding that of course prices go up over time and everything becomes more expensive over time. But I just want to ask if there is a plan on increasing fares as a mitigation measure, and if so, when that might be. Just I know we want to make sure everything is accessible as possible, while understanding that financial feasibility is an important thing to stick to.
Yeah, so what I was trying to indicate was if we don't fill the gap with subsidy, then our options are we will have to either raise fares or cut service or a combination of the two. To cut costs, really the cost is the labor, and we would have to likely cut service in order to cut labor. So that is where, you're kind of caught in that bind. In the past, like during the 2008, 2009 recession, we did have to cut service. And we also had to look at fares as well. And so we had to raise fares. That was really the last time that we've raised fares, for the monthly pass. So at this point, I'm not recommending any of these ideas because a lot, obviously, this past year proves a lot could happen in the few years that I'm talking about when we hit that structural deficit. But I just wanted everyone to be aware, those are our options for the most part.
Understood. And I really am hoping, and I think we can expect excellent mid-coast ridership coming, and hopefully that is as big as it needs to be able to fill in the costs of that so that we don't have to take those measures. I appreciate your presentation and your answers, and I'm happy to second Councilmember Montgomery Stepp's motion.
Fantastic. So we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Thank you very much. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Gil Caprara.
Aye.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Campillo.
Aye.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Chair Vargas.
Vargas, aye.
Thank you. For East County, Councilmember Mendoza.
Aye.
Thank you. For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Montgomery Stepp.
Yes.
Thank you. For North County Coastal, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
Thank you. For North County Inland, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, aye.
Thank you. For North County Transit District, Councilmember Edson.
Edson, yes.
Thank you. For the Port of San Diego, Commissioner Benelli.
Benelli, yes.
Thank you. And for South County, Councilmember Sankey.
Sankey, yes.
Thank you very much, and that passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and do item number 6 is the Transportation Development Act and State Transit Assistance Claim. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Ariana Serniden, please.
Thank you, Chair Vargas. And good morning, Transportation Committee members. SANDAG, as the designated Regional Transportation Planning Agency, or RTPA, is responsible for the allocation of TDA funds to the region's transit operators. This fund source provides a 0.25% of the state sales tax for operating and capital support of public transportation systems and non-motorized transportation projects. Today's item is reflective of a series of steps that have been presented and approved by the board since February leading up to today. First, as you may recall, at its February meeting and as part of the Transnet TDA and State Transit Assistance Revenue Estimates item presented, the board approved the fiscal year 2022 TDA revenue apportionment, and that is estimated by the San Diego County Auditor's Office each year. And then second, and pursuant to state statute, at its June 11th meeting, the SANDAG board determined that both the Metropolitan Transit System and North County Transit District made a reasonable effort to implement the productivity improvements outlined for fiscal year 21 and approved to continue the current performance program in fiscal year 2022. And that is what allows the transit agencies to seek their full TDA available to them today. And then third, at its April 23rd meeting, staff also presented to you and the board approved the transit operator capital improvement programs for fiscal year 2022. And then you just approved item number 5, the transit agency operating budgets on your agenda today. And those transit operator capital improvement and operating budgets are partially funded by TDA revenues and are consistent with the claims being presented to you today. And then finally, this item also includes TDA funds for the Bayshore Bikeway Barrio Logan project. This is also consistent with prior board action to fund a region-wide priority list of bike projects where TDA and Transnet funds are both used on your regional bikeway early action program. The final step in the process is today's item, which describes the TDA and STA program claims. Attachment 1 provides a summary of the claims, and Attachment 2 provides the description and resolutions. And the action for you today is that the Transportation Committee is asked to recommend that the Board of Directors, number 1, adopt resolution numbers 2021-21 through 2021-26, approving the fiscal year 2022 Transportation Development Act and State Transit Assistance claims in substantially the same form as attached. And number 2, approve the STA findings as certified by North County Transit District. Happy to try to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Move staff recommendation.
Thank
Then
you.
I'll-
Mabelli Sankey, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please? Seeing no discussion. Oh, wait, there's a panelist, somebody on, there's a question.
It's me, Chair Vargas. Thank you. Sorry, just wanted to quickly call attention to a particular item. Of course, thank you for the presentation. And I understand that Sandag Board Policy number 027 designates that each year a maximum of 2% of the community service activity funds can be allocated to CTSA organizations like FACT. And I'm just curious as to how the 2% maximum was determined for that policy, partly because it means an organization like FACT only gets about 146,000 of the close to over 7 million that is going to be part of this TDA community allocation.
Yeah, that's consistent with the policy that the Board of Directors has set. So it's the priorities are listed within that board policy, and that's based on what the board has decided previously. So
it's my understanding the state legislature provides up to 5% of eligible annual TDA funds for community transit services. And I understand that it's our policy to do a maximum of 2%. I'm just wondering if anyone was there when that policy was set and as to why it is, simply because I know that for the MTS money, it's 5 million and change, and CTD is 2 million and change. And, you know, if we took that extra little bit, we could more than double FACT's budget, and it's considering the very specific needs that they meet and the limited budget they have. I'm just wondering if the right avenue to potentially see if we raise that to 2.5%, 3%, maybe even. Can anyone address that particular historical issue?
I'm not sure if we have anybody on that would have that history, but maybe that is something that we can look into for you. If
I appreciate that. I look at it and I say that I know that the MTS money, the NCTD money, really is, it's going towards it's core ADA accessibility, and that's obviously very, very important. We have legal liabilities there we have to meet, but a simple few percentage reduction from both of those would lead to a more than 200% increase for FACT. And I know that a lot of senior citizens throughout our entire region really rely on that. I've seen emails and calls from folks who use FACT saying that, you know, that now that they can't provide it for free, and there's lots of other aspects to that funding. Just want to say I'll be raising that, and I will reach out to the appropriate staff so we can potentially find a way to get more money to those community transportation organizations. And with that ends my comments and questions, Chair.
Thank you. Member Sankey?
Yeah, real quick. There are other sources of funds for FACT. And in fact, it was only a month or two ago that this organization approved a resolution that gave certain monies to certain things, and any leftover monies would end up going to FACT. I absolutely agree wholeheartedly that we need to fund that organization as best we can. And I look forward to you, Raul, receiving more detailed information on that. I certainly can't give the details on that, but I know there are other sources of money for FACT that make them a very effective organization for our region, and absolutely agree with you that we should find every way to properly fund them.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you very much for bringing that up.
I'll keep you in the loop when I get it too. Thank you.
Member Edson?
Yes, thank you. I echo Councilmember Sankey's comments with regard to FACT. But NCTD and MTS provide ADA service per requirements set forth in federal law that require service to be made available for persons with a functional disability that prevents them from being able to use fixed route service. Per ADA, age is not a determining factor in the ability to gain access. It is functional capability to complete a transit trip. FACT does not provide ADA service that meets this criteria and does not have to comply with the requirements that are applicable to NCTD and MTS. So I don't know if that helps at all with Councilmember Campillo's question.
Absolutely, it does. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Councilmember.
Okay, and there are also NCTD staff on the line. If you have a deeper question, they may be able to answer.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, are there any other public comments?
No, Chair.
All right, seeing none, can you go ahead and call the roll, please?
Thank you. For the San Diego County Regional Airport Authority, Gil Cabrera. Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Campillo.
Aye.
For the County of San Diego, Chair Vargas.
Vargas, aye.
Thank you. For East County, Councilmember Mendoza.
Mendoza, aye.
Thank you. For Metropolitan Transit System, Councilmember Montgomery Stepp.
Yes.
Thank you. For North County Coastal, Councilmember Zito.
Zito, yes.
Thank you. For North County Inland, Mayor McNamara.
McNamara, aye.
Thank you. For North County Transit District, Councilmember Edson.
Edson, yes.
Thank you. For the Port of San Diego, Commissioner Benelli.
Benelli, yes.
Thank you. And for South County, Councilmember Sankey.
Yankee, yes.
Thank you. And that does pass unanimously.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Just for clarification, on item number 5, we also had a presentation for NCTD budget, and I jumped it because I just missed it. And so I want to make sure that that presentation is, we still want to, that we go ahead and present it, and then we can take a separate motion to just approve that as well. We'll do it separately. So can I turn it over?
As a point of order, Madam Chair, I thought the motion we passed was for both budgets.
Okay, as long as everybody's okay with that. We didn't do the presentation for NCTD, and so I just want to double check that everybody's okay with that. Legally, we're doing everything fine.
I believe that the motion that was made was staff recommendation on both of the budgets, even notwithstanding the fact that NCTD did not make their presentation. So it should be fine the way it is.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, and MTS is always better than NTCD anyway, so.
Well, I just want to get, I know folks do a lot of work to try to make sure that they get things done. And so I don't want to, I want to make sure I gave people the opportunity.
Madam Chair, I completely agree.
So thank you. If everybody's okay, then we're going to go back to item number 4, which is the regional, the 2021 regional plan, Will of Technology. I had 2 folks. There was, let's see, Member Edson?
Yes, thank you. So let me put that hat back on from that item. I had a couple of questions. Actually, Councilmember Zito kind of dove into the first one, which was the lagging regulatory environment and setting standards. So thank you for the answers for that and for the question, Councilmember Zito. My other one was solutions also. The other weakness that was pointed out was lack of investments, for example, in digital infrastructure and in both smart cities and in vehicle technologies. What type of actions is SANDAG contemplating to address that issue?
I can take it, sure. So I think the first action was developing a regional transportation plan that makes a lot of those investments in the regional transportation system. And then updating the ITS architecture, as I've explained, to account for the digital infrastructure that's going to be required for the future of transportation. And then we need to figure out how to work together and incentivize local jurisdictions to be making those investments that are going to be required at the local level as well. And so we've put resources into the regional plan for just that.
Thank you.
I also wanted to just add a little bit on in response to the previous question. So there's, I think, lots of economic incentive and leverage from having, there was this question about whether it's mandated or not. And I think without mandates, you would realize that there's lots of value in having standardized approaches being used throughout the region. There's just basically so much reuse. That's how industry does it, and that's how public sector should do it. More reuse, more leverage.
Okay, member Mr. Benelli, do you still have a question? I know.
Thanks, Madam Chair. In the interest of time and to help us get started with the Juneteenth celebration, I'll hold my comments and observations because I have a number of them. I'll get another bite at the apple here at the Transportation Committee or at the full Sandag Board of Directors, but thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Councilmember David.
Yeah, thank you. I won't be quite as nice as Mr. Benelli, but I did want to make one more comment, and this is more of a comment than a question, but although staff can respond if they want to, which is, I thought Ray's chart that showed the acceleration and the adoption of technology to be interesting and very salient. And our ability to respond to that is a little bit challenged at times. I mean, when it took the automobile 60 years to become mainstream, that gives you a lot of time to develop regulations and policies and procedures on how to deal with that. With other new things coming along very fast, we're all involved with government. I think one of the key pillars of government is government needs to be inclusive, it needs to be transparent, and it needs to be thorough, and it needs to be complete so that everybody is part of the process. And so I think one of the challenges that we're faced with as these things hit us very rapidly, how can we go about maintaining those overall principles and still respond in a timely fashion? And I believe all of us in our governments are struggling with that right now, and it'd be good to collaborate and understand ways to do that without losing those core principles of making sure everybody's included and that we're being transparent and open and thorough, which is not a requirement none of those are requirements on the private industry. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment, Councilmember Zito. I think it's extremely important because either we get ahead of it and we reinvent the way that we accommodate and regulate these type of technologies, or we're always going to be stopping the technologies from being implemented. So if you just think back a year or two ago with the shared bikes or the scooters, right? Had we planned for that, we would probably have a much we would have been able to roll that technology out and people could have actually been using it. But the response is you can't do that, right? Because we're behind the curve. They dump all of the bikes, and then now the regulations are how we get the bikes off of the curbs, rather than saying, let's come up with a way to accommodate this new technology that's really revolutionizing transportation, at least micro transportation in that particular case. So we do need to rethink, and we're, at Sandag, we're trying to rethink, like, what are these technologies that are going to be coming in the next 10 to 20 years, and hopefully we can respond to them in a more proactive way.
Yeah, I think that's really the intent of the regional plan. It's recognizing that change is happening. It's happening very quickly, and it would be negligent to plan transportation in the same way that we had in the past. And a lot of the technical work that I talked about that we're doing it to help support our member agencies, local jurisdictions. So we've already been working on a concept of operations, and now we're doing system requirements for that smart intersection system and curb management system. We're now kind of procuring a bench that will be available to all of you for technology providers that operate, flexible fleets, so that we can have some consistency across the region and work together, as a region to address some of these concerns. So I think that we're trying to help you all the best that we can right now to be more ready and to not be in that position where we're constantly reacting.
Thank you.
I'll make one more plug for the fact that we should be doing consortiums across cities and regions so that we reuse what has been learned and done elsewhere successfully.
Thank you. Oh, I think we have one public comment.
Thank you, Chair. Mike Bullock, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you very much. I worked for 36 years for Lockheed Martin. And we designed satellites and we operated satellites, and we tested satellites and we upgraded satellites, and they were for the Air Force. And we wrote the request for proposals, and we responded to the request for proposals in a very competitive environment. And so that's really the way that complicated things should be operated. And car parking is a complicated car parking system. Now I hear this curb management phrase thrown out there, but that is, to me, primarily car parking. And there's off-street car parking, and every company that has a lot of employees has their car parking. And who's operating these car parking systems? Where is the Uber of car parking? You know, I've talked a bit about what a good car parking system looks like. It's a little bit complicated, and no company wants to really do a good job of managing their car parking because they're in some other business and they're focused somewhere else. But they would be happy to have an Uber of car parking come in and operate their car parking. And in fact, Sandag has employees, and how are they operating the car parking? Do they have solar canopies? That requires financing, and it requires contracting with our energy districts, and it's a bit complicated. And so Sandag should not operate and design car parking any more than the Air Force should design satellites and operate satellites and test satellites. Sandag should create an RFP. You should be in the driver's seat. You should figure out how a car parking should be managed. So we're no longer, you know, harming economically people that might like to not drive. And so that's one of the most important things about a car parking, is it provides earnings to those losing money because the parking is being provided. And it's to Sandag's interest, and it's to society's interest to do a better job of managing all this car parking that we have. There's tremendous potential for solar, you know, energy. And this is kind of out of my field. I'm a transportation guy. I'm a car guy, like Joe Biden says. And you know, I deliver papers on cars and how cars can achieve climate stabilizing targets. But parking is a big part of that. And you know, I'm aware of all the sunlight that is falling there, and how much the employees would love to have solar canopy. You know, saves the paint job in your car. But Sandag needs to put out the RFP and get someone to manage car parking, to design car parking systems and take on that business. And that's very important. And it could be part of 5 Big Moves. I hope it is.
Mr. Bullock, your time is up, but I appreciate all your comments.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Mr. Tucker.
Yes, I just wanted to share that NCTD is working closely with Sandag on particularly the mobility as a service. And we're going to be pushing out a request for information and followed by a procurement for a full mobility as a service program that will include microtransit. It would include the requirements for app that will have schedule, trip, fare, multitude of fare options, also be integrated with other transportation network companies. And it's also going to include rewards programs. So I think over the next 12 to 24 months, the region is going to see an initial rollout. We're looking at the city of Carlsbad and the city of San Marcos as we move forward with implementing. So some of the things that have been talked about today, you're going to see shortly.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to the Sandag staff for leading us in this process, and to all of our board members for all of their feedback. Our next Transportation Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, July 2nd at 9 a.m. And with that, we are adjourned. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.